Chapter 26. It took me many hours sitting in front of the computer, staring at the pictures of Pert's body, which were taken within the autopsy room. I thoroughly scrutinized every single one of them, switching my eyes between the notes written by the responsible pathologist. I was trying to find anything that my friend might have overlooked, anything that could ascertain Pert's manner of death. Discoloration, cranial intrusion, chest, lungs, heart, abdomen, arms, and legs examinations. I leaned against the chair, closing my eyes to take a break. I was in the same hotel I always booked. The room was quiet, an excellent place to start working on something that required high concentration. If what Boone said were true, the calling record we found in Pert's line chat could mean a secret meeting, and that woman might have poisoned Pert. Who would want to kill Pert at this time? Undoubtedly, every woman on Earth would gladly do that if they knew what a womanizer he was. Nevertheless, it shouldn't have gone that far to kill someone like this, unless Pert ran out of luck and found himself a psychotic lady who wanted to keep him all to herself. Speaking of psychotic lady, my mind drifted to Jane, a sad, pitiful woman who was brutally murdered and was hanged in her own bathroom. Suddenly, the day I conducted the autopsy at the crime scene resurfaced in my mind. It was the first day I met Tan. His tall figure stood out among the throng of people. His countenance and gaze showed few emotions, which ultimately led me to suspicion of his involvement with Jane's death, contrary to Jane's sister, who wept her heart out that she almost fainted on the spot. It was like I heard something snapped inside my head when I thought about this. I suddenly sat up straight in my seat, my eyes widened. I looked at Pert's post-mortem pictures on the screen. If any woman wanted Pert dead because of what he did, it would be her. I pulled out my cell immediately after this thought popped in my head. Who should I call? Boone? Captain Aim? Or Tan? The person who should probably know Jane's sister should be Tan. I should call Tan. There were no other obvious choices. It wasn't that I missed him, or that I wanted to hear his voice, or anything like that. Yes, Bun. Tan answered the call. Tan, do you have a contact number for Jane's sister? I think I have. Why would you need it? Here's the thing. I directed my mouth into the phone. Is it possible that woman might be Jane's sister? Huh? Tan's voice rose in surprise. Which woman? During Pert's disappearance, a woman had to be in contact with him, one day before he died. Unfortunately, it was a call between them, so I don't know the details of their conversation. However, it's strange that he would talk to a stranger when he was trying to make others think that he was kidnapped. I just realized that Tan's voice sounded like he wasn't fully awake, so I glanced at the clock on my computer screen. 2:18 a.m. Shit, I exclaimed softly. Sorry, I woke you up. It's okay. I heard Tan roll on his bed. I'm having trouble sleeping lately anyway, so you were saying Pert talked to some woman during his disappearance? Yes, the woman could be Jane's sister. Maybe she found out that Pert had killed her sister, and she learned that he was trying to escape, so she approached him and killed him. That's impossible. Jane's sister and Pert already knew each other. The information halted my thoughts. If they really went to see each other, then Jane's sister must know about Pert's plan to lay low, unless Pert didn't know the woman he was talking to was Jane's sister. They both used avatar IDs, right? That's weird. I was rubbing my chin thoughtfully. Well, first, I need to find a way to contact Jane's sister. If I could talk to her, maybe I might find something. I'll send you the number, but... A pause. Are you putting yourself in danger again, Bun? I frowned. Hey, this time it's different. I know it is, but anything could happen. If you hit the bullseye, you could be in danger again. Tan spoke, his voice laced with concern. Don't you want to know who killed Pert? I felt a little bit upset now. Why was everyone against the idea of me continuing my investigation on Pert's case? Even Tan, who should have sided with me. It's not that I don't want to know, but knowing that doesn't change anything. Like what those doctors like to say, getting this information doesn't change the management. The dead would still be dead, and you're putting yourself at risk. I don't want you to get involved with any other killers. I sighed. Do you want me to let this pass? Will you, if I ask? Tan asked. No, I replied, without missing a beat. Tan forced out a laugh. I know I couldn't stop you from doing what you wanted to do. I guess I can only sit back and worry about you like this. I ran my hand across my face and cut the conversation short. Just send me the number. I'll do whatever I want with it. And go back to sleep. Sorry to bother you. I'll send it to you, but can I have a good night as my reward? What is it with him? Was it the right decision to call him? I took a deep breath and slowly exhaled to calm my mind. Good night. Good night to you too. And then he ended the call. I put the phone face down upon the tabletop. My hand returned to my face for a second time. I mentally reprimanded myself for having the audacity to call someone at 2 a.m. because of my barely contained excitement. I should have called Boone and listened to his complaints. Better this than having to endure sweet words from that little punk before bed. Nevertheless, a smile slipped out from my lips at Tan's sweet words every damn time. The first thing I saw upon entering the forensic examination room was a bag of cow tongue mud, the most enormous one I'd ever seen, to be exact, along with snacks and local Thai food lining up on my desk. I stood there, stupefied, while the ER nurses rushed in, led by Tick, the senior nurse, who was like my beloved aunt. She held me tightly as soon as she saw me enter the room. Oh, thank goodness! Thank God you came back safe, doctor! She stepped back, raising her hand to adjust the collar of my shirt. How are you? You're not hurt anywhere, are you? I'm fine. I lifted my head to look at the other nurses and accidentally met Kai's eyes, the nurse who was my ex-girlfriend. We had tried our best to avoid each other since we'd broken up last year. However, this time she was standing before me. Relief was evident on her face when she saw that I was safe and well. I sent Kai a faint smile. At least we used to have good memories together. Dr. Bunn, come and eat. We prepared these meals to welcome you back. Eat your fill. Then you can go back to work. Tick pulled me by the arm to the chair. I eyed the bag of cow tongue mud suspiciously. This bunch of cow tongue mud looks awfully familiar, don't you think? It's the Sorrowit boy, doctor. He left them for you this morning. Tick handed the silverware to me. You have no idea how frightened we were when you were gone missing. I couldn't work at all. I could only pray for you to come back to us safely. I looked at the bag of cow tongue mud and thought about the boy who brought it there. A tall, willowy boy with a charming personality. If he could still bring me these, then he was probably all right and happy. Guys, I can't eat them all by myself. You're welcome to join me. Suttat, the male nurse, reached out to take some cow tongue mud from the bag. Yeah, speaking of the lad, he didn't come here alone this morning. He's got some trade school student on his motorcycle. Well, what do you know? Our doctor has been dumped, another nurse said teasingly. That's why he brought this enormous bag of sweets to comfort my broken heart. I played along. The current atmosphere in this small examination room brimmed with energetic and cheerful chatter. I felt so happy being with my lovely colleagues. I didn't know if I would ever find such an amiable atmosphere in my new workplace. Boone would have me work as a medical professor at the university. I imagined everything must be completely different than this. Before everyone went their separate ways to their respective duties, I took a selfie with everyone in it, keeping the picture as one of my good memories in my life. It was not a surprise that people kept pouring into one of the few shopping malls in the province. Sitting in one of the restaurants in the basement of the mall, I watched the people strode past by. People here were different from people in Bangkok. No one cared you dressed inappropriately when you went to the mall. Each of them dressed in casual clothes. Some were wearing pasan, some clad in homespun, and some even wore northern Thai hill tribe costumes. I didn't even want to think that I had to return to live among men and women who dressed boldly and wore dark makeup once more. The sound of high-heeled steps on the floor pulled my attention from the throng of people. A young woman walked towards me. She wore a simple white knee-length dress and adorned light makeup on her face. I stood up on my feet as a courtesy. "Are you Miss Rung?" I asked. The young woman bobbed her head. I noticed that she refused to meet my eyes. "Let's order the food, shall we?" I'm not really hungry, actually." She sat on the chair opposite me. "Do you want to talk to me, doctor? I have a class this afternoon. I don't have much time." She lifted her wrist to look at the watch as if she was trying to urge me to get on with it. I looked at the woman in front of me. Her name was Rung, Jane's biological sister. I had called her from the number Tan gave me, saying that I was the pathologist responsible for Jane's autopsy and that I was here to discuss something with her. The woman declined at first, saying that if I wanted to talk, we could do so on the phone. But I insisted on meeting her in person, since I wanted to keep her posted about the progress I'd made. Strange. It seems like Rung didn't want to hear what I had to say about her sister's death. I'm not going to beat around the bush then. I clasped my hands on the tabletop. "Jane, your sister had been murdered. Did you know about this?" Miss Rung widened her eyes. "What?" I knew from the moment I set foot in the room that Jane's death was a fabricated suicide scene, but I was threatened by the prosecutor's men to report it as a suicide. That's why I was abducted a while ago. I fixed Rung with a penetrating stare. "During Pert's disappearance, have you had any contact with him?" "Contact? How exactly?" Her brows crushed together. "But Pert's dead." "But he was alive during the time he was gone." "Why do you suspect I contacted him during that time?" Rung looked down at her watch again and rose to her feet. "I have to go now." For a split second, I really wanted to turn into a psychiatrist. I would have been better at catching people in a lie if I hadn't slept through the lecture during my rotation at the psychiatric ward. But there was one thing that hadn't slipped my attention. She didn't seem that shocked after hearing that her sister had been murdered. "Hold on, Miss Rung." She stopped dead and turned to look at me. "Yes? I believe your phone is ringing." I gestured to her handbag. "Oh, thank you." She bent down to open the bag, rummaging through it in search of her cell. "Please excuse me. If you have time, let's pick that up later on. About Jane, I'll contact the police myself." Rung turned around and walked away, looking at her cell phone screen. Suddenly, she stopped dead in her tracks and slowly turned to me with a panic-stricken face. I stood up from the chair and watched her reaction. The corner of my lip pulled up victoriously. With a quick gait, Rung turned back and was about to walk away from the restaurant, but a tall man sitting next to my table stood up and blocked her path. The man took off his sunglasses with light brown lens. In his hand was a white smartphone, the one that used to belong to Pert. "I'm a police officer." Captain Aim introduced himself to Rung in a deep voice. "Please hand over your phone." In a world where technology had tremendously advanced, it was difficult for everyone to catch up with its pace. One must be extremely careful in communicating with someone, for it may later backfire and be marked as a horrible mistake. To be honest, I had no idea whether or not Rung still had the Line ID account, which she used to communicate with Pert on her phone, or whether she had already blocked Pert's account, but it was worth the risk. So I'd asked Captain Aim to call the mysterious account from Pert's phone. If we were lucky, Rung's phone would ring, but if this plan failed, I would try other means. I didn't know in what way Miss Rung had been involved with Pert, or if she was related to Jane's death, but at least she had lied about speaking with him. I guessed I had to leave it to the police for further investigation. I would call Aim to talk about this again tomorrow. Moral of the story. If you want to contact a dying man without anyone knowing, don't forget to delete and block the account of the person you talk to. Rung confessed she put cyanide in Pert's coffee. Great job, Aim. I spoke into the phone as my other hand continued to write a report of the dead body I just performed an autopsy. It was an 85-year-old female patient who died of unknown cause in her bedroom. Once I pried open her cranium, I found a large volume of blood that was ruptured from her cerebral arteries. No signs indicated that she'd been hit on the head. And considering her age and pre-existing medical conditions, the manner of her death was listed as natural cause. Why did she poison him though? She knew that Pert hadn't been kidnapped, like the news said. Turns out that these two collaborated to conceal Jane's actual cause of death. My hand seized at Captain A's words. What did you say? This is what she told me. She said that one night at December 10th, she went to see Jane at her room at 7 p.m. She had been trying to knock on the door for a long period of time, but no one came to answer the door, so she used the spare key to open it. Once inside, she saw Pert trying to hang Jane's body. She tried to ask for help, but was threatened by Pert, and then he threatened her that if she told anyone about this, he would kill her and her family. Therefore, Miss Rung had been keeping it a secret and refused to tell us what happened. The captain paused mid-sentence after I burst out laughing. I'm sorry, Aim. Please go on. I'm listening. She didn't know what to do, so she went back home and waited out until Tan found the body. After that, we informed Miss Rung about her sister. She came to the crime scene and cried when she saw Jane's body. She was scared to tell us it was Pert since she was afraid for her life. When she heard Pert had gone missing, she found out where he had fled and had another woman contact him. She called Pert and told him she wanted to see him, threatening the man that if he wouldn't come, she'd expose him about Jane. Pert told her to meet at the warehouse, and Miss Rung poisoned the coffee she offered him, all because she feared that he would kill her. That's one hell of a story. I shook my head. What do you think, Doc? Imagine a rendezvous where your life is at stake. I mean, I don't think I'd be in the mood to buy him coffee. And if I were Pert, I wouldn't dare drink whatever she brought either. And besides, Aim. I put the pen down on the table and turned to look at Anon, who was sewing the deceased skull back into place. Huh? Miss Rung claimed that she went to meet Jane at 7 p.m. and saw that she was dead. I paused for a second. But the time of death was between 8 to 12 hours, which means Jane must have died after midnight. The captain chuckled. Maybe she doesn't know that the pathologist can estimate the time of death. Whatever the truth may be, it might not be unraveled before us anytime soon, but apparently someone must be lying. Plus, I found pictures of Pert and Rung on the phone. There should be something more than we thought. I felt very sick with those who had zero control of their sexual urge, like Pert. They ended up dead at the expenses of their lustful desire. Keep me posted, Aim. Sure. When are you leaving, though? Around mid-January. I'm waiting for the hospital to find my stand-in. We've got a candidate. Did you know that? A female pathologist, if I might add. I teased the captain, knowing that he liked to covertly ogle pretty girls. It was something he could only do watching, since the captain already had a wife. Ah, came the captain's reply. But will she work as good as you? You worried about my work? I bet you're smiling like a moron right now when you know my replacement will be a woman. I had to take the revenge on what Aim did to me since he constantly teased me about Tan. The captain cleared his throat. Yeah, I've got an inside source that says the inspector might be transferred elsewhere. I'm assuming there will be a major re-engineering of the local police force. I'm terrified actually, even though I haven't been involved in it much. Just do your best for now, Aim. The captain and I shot the breeze for a few more minutes before we hung up. I slid the paperwork piled on my desk in the files. I felt a massive stone had been lifted from my chest. I finally know who killed my friend. I wanted to let him know that there was nothing left to worry about. You can now rest in peace, Pert. I hope you'd be born handsome again in the next life. Be more faithful to your girlfriend and do not take anyone's life again. or you'll go to an early grave. My breath caught in my throat as I thought of his face. I inhaled deeply and slowly exhaled before turned to say goodbye to Anon and walked out of the autopsy room. Once outside, I found Tan leaning against the post in front of the building, waiting for me. I stopped, eyeing the man who showed up without advance warning. Tan turned to see me and walked straight to me. Off duty? Yeah, I looked up at him. Why are you here? Why didn't you call first? I did, but your line's busy. I asked the staff around here and he said you're still inside, so I waited. Oh, he must have called when I was on the phone with the captain. What are you doing here? I want to take you to the pedestrian street. It's Friday night. Tan reached out to touch my hand. Please come with me. We've never been there before. I went still for a few seconds. Come to think of it, Tan and I had never hung out together like this. Ever since I moved here, I'd been to the pedestrian street only a couple of times, and there was one time that I went there with my ex-girlfriend, Kai. Well, sure, sounds good. I haven't been there in a while. Tan smiled faintly. Take my car then. I'll drive you home on the way back. The idea of prohibiting all automobile traffic at night to convert the area on the street to set up food shops and retail shops had become very popular in many provinces across the country. I liked this kind of atmosphere, seeing a diverse group of people coming out to spend their money, seeing merchants having a decent area to earn a living. I could see merchandise with a hint of local civilization and a local street band that created a buzz of music to make the pedestrian street look even more enticing. Tan and I stood at one of the food shops that was selling a mouth-watering dish of the oyster omelette. 2 oyster omelets, please, Tan ordered, without missing a beat. Both of his arms carried bags of food that there was almost no room left for any more bags. Give me those, I'll help. I tried to take some bags from Tan for the 3rd time now, but he stubbornly carried all of them himself. Your only job is to eat. Tan spun around, avoiding my reach for the bags. I sighed in annoyance. With my arms crossed over my chest, I looked at the frizzling oyster omelette in the pan, which started to turn crispy and yellowish, the delicious smell wafting around the area. My tummy will burst if I eat all of this. I took a glimpse at the food both of us had blindly bought. Well, I'm okay with that, said a 5'11" man. I expected that his stomach must be as big as his height. If you eat too much that you can't walk, I'll carry you home. Hey, I'm a person, not a python. I can still move after eating. I paid for the oyster omelets before Tan could and took the bag. That's enough for me. Let's find somewhere to sit and eat. Tan led me out to the park by the canal, not far from the pedestrian street. We sat on the grass by the edge of the canal, illuminated by the light. Tan handed a bag of cheap fried meatballs to me. I stabbed the meatball with a stick and popped it in my mouth. The taste wasn't different from the one selling on the roadside shop, but for some unknown reason, this one was way tastier. I glanced over the surface of the water, reflecting the full moon. A gentle cold breeze made me feel cold, but it was tolerable. Bun? Tan's voice rang out amid the silence. You're leaving today. Can I take you to the airport? Fine. I turned my head to Tan, who was sitting with his legs curled up. His gaze wandered far away. Are you stressed out right now? Tan turned to look at me quizzically. What do you mean? About the case. About what you've been through lately. Can you handle this? Tan pondered. Of course I'm stressed. In this kind of situation, anyone would be. I stabbed a meatball with the stick and brought it near Tan's mouth. Then eat. Tan let out a laugh. What kind of mood are you in? I didn't even know the answer to that myself. All I knew was that I wanted to make this man feel happier than he was at this moment. Hey, do you want some or not? I do. Tan bent down and snatched a meatball from the stick. The gloomy air around Tan seemed to have evaporated. We were eating and talking about trivialities. I noticed that Tan tried not to bring up the case. He was probably fed up with all these things. I looked at him while he was telling me the history of the temple located not far from the park. What can I do to make him happier? Anything except giving him a steady relationship in which he sought. Even if it was just a temporal consolation, it's probably better than nothing at all. Can I stay at your place tonight? I suddenly asked, interrupting Tan's academic lecture about the history of the ancient temples. He paused and turned to me, dumbfounded. You're acting weird today. I think you're sick. The water heater at my house is broken. But you can take a cold shower. Well, it's cold today. I grabbed the bag of oyster omelette and dug in to avoid further conversation. Then I heard Tan sigh. What should I do with you? He looked emotionally tired and sounded upset. When I bring myself to accept that you won't be my boyfriend anytime soon, then you do this to me. Why? What do you want? Tan stood up. My eyes followed him. It was quite a bit of a shock. Wait! I reached out to grab the other man's hand. Why does he look like that? Should he be happy about this? Sorry. Tan looked down at me, and even though I could see things clearly, I could sense that he was in pain. I rose up and slowly walked over to him. I wrapped my arms around his waist, my forehead resting on his broad chest, which moved in sync with his breathing. I want you to know that I've never loved anyone before in my life, but now all I can think about is you. Imagine how hurt I'd feel if our relationship won't last. My love life had ended so many times over, and I don't want to hurt anymore. I want you to be the one. I could sense that Tan's breath hitch in his throat. He cradled the back of my head with one hand and pulled my waist against him by the other. If there's no lawsuit, no problem with my mom, you'd be my boyfriend, right? Yeah. Do you love me? Tan asked me, the words barely audible. The unpleasant heat rose in my chest like someone had lit it on fire, reaching to my face. I clung to Tan's shirt tightly. Yeah. The night passed with many feelings that stirred inside us. What I did was to fuel Tan's confidence that our feelings were mutual and real, and that it's worth the wait in the long run. Every word, every emotion, every physical touch that I'd given him tonight would encourage his patience to wait until the time came. The time when our paths would merge into one once again, all the way through. I lifted large luggage on the luggage belt to be weighed before it be loaded on the plane. Once I saw that the weight wasn't exceeding the airline limit, a sigh of relief escaped my mouth. I turned to offer a smile for the young female ground staff who handed me the boarding pass. I offered her a quiet thank you and dragged the small bag away from the check-in area. I watched people pass by in the airport, all of them wearing jackets. I, on the other hand, had taken it off and had already put it in my bag, knowing that when I arrived at my destination, the weather would probably be so hot that I would no longer need it. I felt my heart in my mouth. Am I actually leaving here? I dragged my bag to the bench near the gate, half an hour before the scheduled boarding time. I lowered myself down to sit, waiting for the man who was trying to find a spot for the parking, and he'd probably come in soon. Bun! A familiar voice called out to me. I looked up and saw Tan come up to me with 2 cups of ice cream in his hands. It's freezing out, and you still want to eat ice cream? Don't you know that it's best to have ice cream when the weather is cold? Tan lowered himself down and sat next to me. I laughed and shook my head, taking a cup of famous ice cream from him. Where did you get that weird theory from? Let me rephrase then. It's best to have ice cream with the man you love. Tan deadpanned. I sighed in annoyance. Don't you feel embarrassed saying something like that? If I did, I wouldn't be doing this. Tan put ice cream in his mouth, absent-mindedly watching the passerby. Because you aren't my boyfriend yet, so I have to use this method as courtship, as though we've just met. We're not high schoolers anymore. I'm a reasonable person, and I don't get swept away by emotion. We should be fine. I tried the soft texture of the ice cream. The sweetness of it was refreshing. Tan smiled softly. Bun? Don't forget our promise. I turned to look at Tan, who now looked clearly saddened. I jammed my elbow into his rib playfully. Don't you make those sad puppy eyes. If you want me to keep the promise, then do what I said. Get yourself together, be yourself, do what you love and are good at. Just be happy. I paused slightly. Do I sound like a grandpa giving his grandson blessings? Tan laughed. Sounds like my parents when they give blessings on New Year Eve. A smile slipped out of my lips. Then say thank you to your elder. Tan flippantly put his palms together to show a sign of gratitude. Why, thank you. You're such a good boy, aren't you? I shook my head. I'll go to the boarding gate now. I stood up and turned to Tan, who looked up at me with sadness in his eyes. He said nothing. We stared at each other wordlessly for a moment. Everything around us was constantly in motion, but it seems like the time between the two of us was slowing down to a stop. Something started to develop inside me, an uncomfortably tight feeling inside my chest. The person sitting in front of me was someone who had just entered my life, but how could I feel this breathless? Have a safe flight, came his last reply at last. He reached out to hold my fingertips as though he was aware that this hand wasn't yet his. Call me when you get to Bangkok, yeah? Fine. I couldn't resist reaching out and ruffling his hair. We'll see each other in court anyway. Can I see you outside of court too? Alright, fine. Anywhere you want. So demanding. I removed my hand from his hair. Bye now. I decided to turn around and walk out of there as quickly as possible. I didn't know why I had to move as fast as I did in the moment when it wasn't even boarding time yet. Maybe it's because I didn't want to see his face much longer, for I might cave without thinking. I might throw myself into his arms and say, screw it all. Let's be together despite all these problems, despite being hundreds of miles apart. I'm sorry I'm so demanding. Sorry I played hard to get. I'm sorry I always put my head before my heart. I stopped, glancing at the light above the ceiling. It took an immense amount of willpower not to turn around. This is the right thing to do, I told myself. Consider it a test, a punishment that he had once tricked me. If Tan passed the test, there would be nothing left to fear. But if we grow apart, for whatever reason, it would not be as painful as the beginning of our relationship. Stay strong, Bunny Kid. You need to stay strong.